I think it's important to emphasize.
Well, I'm back, folks, broadcasting live from Ottawa. Want to apologize for my absence. I was extremely sick this week and just could barely get out of bed. I'm just pulling it together now. But thank you for your loyalty. And thank you for helping me reach 50,000 subscribers. And it's a pleasure to be back. And we'll be back with election news. No, we don't have any results yet. And discuss some of the news of the week.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. So, we live in apocalyptic times. This is Canada's perhaps last chance to keep itself together with this election. If Mark Carney wins, I believe this country will be separating. We'll lose parts of this country. And God only knows what's going to happen. But I think Pierre Poilievre is going to win this election. And I think a lot of pollsters and liberals are going to be very surprised. Because here's what's coming if we don't elect a conservative government today. We are headed, and the government's own the PCO, the Privy Council Office, has been talking about this. We'll get into that more later. But here's what we have been subject to for the last 4 months. PSYOPs, psychological operations. People are monkeying with our heads. They're telling us to believe that black is white, that up is down. And it's reminiscent of 1984. Now this sign was viewed in Toronto, posted to X. Elbows up. Resist, resist, resist. It's maddening to watch this. This was paid for by Greenpeace. They're taking credit for it. But what does this remind you of? If you've ever read the book 1984, and I did it. I recorded my voice reading that novel, and you can find that on Substack. But what is it reminiscent of? 1984, the movie. Peace, not war. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. George Orwell in 1984. And look at this. This is the hate session in the movie where they watch a film of the enemy and they get furious and they rant and they rave. And this is exactly the kind of atmosphere the liberals have been creating in this country. And it's frightening. The similarities are absolutely frightening. Yeah, elbows up. These people are going berserk. But here's the, if people think Pierre Poilievre made some mistakes in this election, it's only not listening to his inner voice. And for the last 2 weeks, he's been on the mark. The first 2-3 weeks of this election campaign, Poilievre was listening to his communications people, and he didn't need to do that. And he shouldn't have done that.
If you would permit me one personal comment. It's widely known that your handlers have been holding back your natural exuberance in order to project an image of gravitas and restraint, but I think they may have gone too far. I mean, really, is it necessary to be as boring as Mr. Carney in order to prove that you can be a leader? I believe that Canada is ready for a passionate statement from a passionate leader who can evoke the country we all love and answer the simple question that is on everyone's lips. What happened to Canada? Where did it go? What happened to the decent, democratic country we had and could still recognize as recently as 10 years ago? What and who is responsible for those 10 lost years, and how should they be held accountable? To answer these questions, I am honored, I am pleased, I am chuffed to now welcome the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the applicant for the role of Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre. And like I said, Pierre, let her rip.
Let her rip, and he's been doing that. And I think there's a lesson here. Because listen to your conscience, your inner voice. And of course, I had to laugh about this. They accused Pierre Poilievre of being Donald Trump-like. And of course, Justin Trudeau used to do the same thing. And Mark Carney imitated Pierre Poilievre a couple of days ago when his plane landed at the airport and he did a hangar speech. And there's Justin Trudeau doing the same thing Pierre Poilievre. Was that Trump-like when Justin Trudeau did it? I don't know. Here's almost breaking news this week. We found out that Mark Carney has not just a tax dodger, but the Canada Revenue Agency is investigating and has fined Brookfield Assets Management, which of course is Mark Carney's company, or was his company. He was the co-chairman of it. So this is all very interesting. And that's where we are with this. Now, I think one of the most dangerous things on the horizon, if Mark Carney wins this election, is the equity tax. Now, Pierre Poilievre has said he's not going to do this. And we have that video. We do have the video, yes.
Allow a tax on home equity, period, full stop. Not going to happen.
Hi, my name's Tracy Pepe. I'm the ex-chair of CARP Brampton. And I wanted to ask, because the Liberal think tank has been using Generation Squeeze for some information. And they have been suggesting, obviously, to old age security to roll it back, but also to use the taxes on our home equity So my question to you is, I think you said you are not rolling back old age security, but will you not put taxes on the equity that we have saved in our homes?
Two questions. One, we will protect old age security, GIS, and CPP. You will continue to get your inflation indexed benefits starting at age 65. Second, we will never allow a tax on home equity, period, full stop. Not going to happen. But you're right to raise the question because, weirdly, the Liberals put a question on your tax form to find out what primary residence you have. I don't know why they need that information. If it's not a taxable asset, then why does the tax department need to know about it? The Liberals have also been using your tax dollars to fund studies advocating a tax on home equity, so that if you sell your home to downsize or move into a senior's home, then you would have to pay full capital gains tax on that amount. That would be a crippling policy decision for our seniors. And just Saturday, Mr. Carney came out with a platform that requires $130 billion of brand new spending above and beyond what Justin Trudeau had already projected. They're pledging to, if you add up Trudeau's planned spending and Carney's new promises, it's $250 billion of new debt that they would add if they're elected to a fourth term. Now, I ask you a question. What happens when the finance officials tap them on the shoulder and says, you're out of money, you need to go find more? Well, they're going to go out and they're going to tax your home equity. They're going to go after your house, and they'll lie and deny, and they'll never admit it before an election. Of course not. But when have they ever, the tax increases Liberals have brought in, when have they ever admitted it before the election happens? They do it after they no longer need your vote, but still need your money. Bottom line is, Liberals will tax your home equity if you give them the chance in this election. We will never let that happen. Your home belongs to you, and when you sell, you should keep every single penny for yourself and your kids.
Yes. And that could win this election for Pierre Poilievre. That is a, what else we got here? Oh, yes. Can't emphasize that enough. Now, this is an article by Kevin Klein, Beware the Next Liberal Tax May Be the Roof on Your Head. So this is becoming a serious issue. And Mark Carney has not confirmed he will do it, but he has not denied it either. So I think that's an admission. Now, this is a Future Life Social Mobility in question. This was produced by the Government of Canada, PCO, Privy Council Office. And Mark Carney was stunned, so apparently stunned, or he was pretending to be stunned, that this report suggests a dystopic future for Canada, with people literally foraging food because they can't afford to buy groceries anymore. And this country has been going in a downward cycle ever since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. And so that is definitely something we should all be on the watch for. And this is a prediction about the future of Canada if Mark Carney becomes Prime Minister, as an elected Prime Minister. I think it's a very accurate picture of what's going to happen to this country. And it's not pretty. And
Althea Raj, the Toronto Star. Polls suggest that you're on your way to a majority government, but not with more than 50% of Canadians voting for you. So I'd like to ask you a double-barreled question, if I can.
Sure.
Do you think it's fair that you could possibly obtain a very strong majority mandate with less than a majority of the country voting for you? And we've seen in the last week you sharpening your attacks against Pierre Poilievre. We saw the crowd boo this morning. We saw them boo last night. We've seen the Conservative leader also sharpen his attacks, suggest that Liberals don't want people to own a house. They want people foraging for their food, or they believe that the Liberal future means that you will be foraging for our food. If you do win on Monday, what will you do to reach out to all the millions of people who will have voted for Pierre Poilievre?
Well, they're not going to have to forage for food.
Notice the government of Canada wrote this document.
That's look. I'm running to be Prime Minister of the country.
A great question. It was about how after the lost Liberal decade, many media outlets cannot actually share their information on Facebook and Instagram. This has really attacked our local independent media, and maybe that's the goal with out of control inflation, rising housing costs, crime and chaos in our streets. Liberals are trying to get a fourth term by shutting out that information. Their entire campaign is based on making you forget what happened over the last 10 years of Liberal government and forget what will happen in the next 15 years if you read this report that was just leaked out that says that Canadians will be forced to forage on public lands for food if things continue on the current Liberal track. So it's not surprising that Liberals would want to shut out discussion on that. But a fourth Liberal term is not the answer. What we need is a new Conservative government to bring change so you can afford food and homes, change so there's safety in your streets, change so that we have freedom of expression. Thank you very much.
Now, I was glad to hear Pierre Poilievre say freedom of expression, because sometimes he's been a little vague on that in the past. But we never want to see the Online Harms Act ever appear again. It just cannot happen. And I think Mark Carney would introduce legislation. He's already suggested he approved the Online Harms Act. And he wants censorship of so-called misinformation, disinformation, which, of course, is anything the Liberal government doesn't agree with. So that's another good reason for Pierre Poilievre to become Prime Minister. So I'm optimistic. And there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And in keeping with that, look at this decade, in the last 10 years. Look what the Liberal government has brought you. Homicides are up 33%. Auto theft, 39%. Theft over 5,000, 48%. This is a lawless society. And Pierre Poilievre has committed, one of his key campaign points from day one has been safe streets, safe communities, which he actually borrowed from the Harper administration. But that is a great emphasis of his campaign, to fight crime. He wants to use the notwithstanding clause to ensure that criminals stay in prison and serve their full time. And so judges can't decide, the Supreme Court judges can't decide to allow criminals to walk the streets when they haven't served their time. So I think that's but this is the Liberal report card, and it's not very glowing. Now, another reason I think Pierre Poilievre is going to surprise everybody because he's getting support. Yes, he's getting support from quarters that used to be Liberal or NDP. And Pierre Poilievre is getting huge support from unions. I don't think this has ever happened in Canada before. And I wrote a column on this for my Substack page. in which I compared it to 1972 when President Richard Nixon received huge support from what they called the hard hat vote, which is basically blue collar workers, many of them union. They supported Nixon in huge numbers, and it contributed to one of the biggest electoral college landslide in history. That's going to happen today, Pierre Poilievre. And I think we are seeing, make sure I got this here. No. Yes, we are seeing tremendous support, and that hard hat vote is going to put Poilievre over the top. Now, I wanted to show this, and please excuse my hesitation tonight. I'm still not 100%. Oh, I see my numbers are getting pushed down. Oh my goodness. Dewey defeats Truman. Famous picture from the 1948 U.S. presidential election. Everybody thought Harry Truman couldn't win, that Harry Truman would not serve a second term. You recall he was vice president to Franklin Roosevelt, and when Roosevelt died shortly after his 44 election. So people thought Truman couldn't do it himself. And Harry Truman toured the whole country by train and spoke to small crowds, large crowds, sometimes huge crowds. And that's an indicator of winning. I think if Pierre Poilievre had stopped listening to his communications people 5 weeks ago, that this election would be a sure bet for Poilievre and the Conservatives. But in the last 2 weeks, he has really hit his stride, and I think he's convinced a lot of Canadians. Now, why the polling? Well, because pollsters sometimes ask ridiculous questions, hoping for ridiculous answers. But a lot of conservatives just don't want anyone to know how they're voting. And I think that's probably what's happening here. I think a lot of conservative voters just don't want to talk to pollsters. And so they're not responding. And it's also a case of the 18 to 35-year-olds don't have landlines. They have cell phones. They have smartphones, and they generally don't always answer the phone. Whereas 60 and over, a lot of them still have landlines, and they're at home, and they're answering the phone, and they love to talk to pollsters. So I think we're going to be shocked. I think we're going to be stunned at what happens today, because I think there's a lot of support out there for Pierre Poilievre, that it's not immediately evident of where that support is, but he is cut into traditional left wing. He has united this country in a way that no prime minister has in years. He's united the left and the right, and our conservatives are going to the ballot box today with the same intention as a lot of unionized or blue collar workers. And it's a coalition of common sense. I would call it a common sense coalition. Maybe I just coined a phrase there, but that's what Pierre Poilievre has tapped into in this election. It's a common sense coalition. And so I'll make sure I showed you this one. Yeah, okay. And we had a heck of a time getting this broadcast on tonight anyway, so you can, if you're watching this broadcast on the West Coast, prairies, Ontario and Quebec, you just got lots of time to vote. Polls close at 9. And you can still do it. Go and vote. Go and vote because this election is crucial. It's crucial to the history of this country and the survival of this country. I strongly believe Alberta will not stand for a Mark Carney government. And they're tired. They're tired of being used and abused by the rest of Canada. They're tired of being told like they can't dig for oil or gas. They can't sell it. But Alberta is expected to pay for the rest of Canada, to have not, with an equalization program that basically puts the wealthier provinces at the beck and call of the poorer ones. And Alberta's sick of paying the dues to that. I can tell you that with complete certainty. Now, I'm predicting, and I'm going to say it again, a slim Conservative majority. And we'll be back if it's a minority government, either way, I think we'll be back at the polls again within 4 to 5 months. But this is a very crucial election. Very crucial election. And I haven't voted yet, actually. I'm going to go out after this broadcast and vote. I waited all day. And I don't think I've ever not voted in a federal election or even a provincial. I always vote because it is your duty to vote and obligation. It's your democratic obligation. So I encourage you, don't listen to the media. Don't listen to the pollsters who have been polling for Mark Carney from the beginning of this campaign. Mark Carney is steeped in corruption. The more we learn about Mark Carney, we don't even know how much money Carney is worth. He refuses to divulge that information, saying, I'm obeying the rules. I have 120 days. So he expects to get elected as prime minister. He might get around to telling you. But we know he is linked in with some huge corporations. Most of them are selling green energy, green technology, and it's a farce. It's an absolute farce. People are getting wealthy off climate change hysteria. They're getting wealthy off of people's fears that we have 10 years. Not everybody. It's becoming more and more fashionable to say, hey, I don't think there's any sort of ecological crisis, climate crisis. And a lot of people are making money. But look at Greenpeace putting that ad up because they want Mark Carney. They want people to identify Pierre Poilievre with Donald Trump. And the whole thing is ridiculous, of course, because Donald Trump didn't do the things that the liberals are accusing him of. He didn't cut off Social Security in the United States. He's trying to cut waste. But Donald Trump is doing what he needs to do to make America great again. I think Pierre Poilievre can make Canada great again. And I think there'll be a day when he can use that phrase without being unfairly linked to Donald Trump. Because there are some differences, certainly personality-wise. But I'll tell you this: when I met Pierre Poilievre the first time, there was something about his determination. He had actually managed in by-election. And I saw this guy and I said, you know, there's a future prime minister here because he's got the political savvy and he's got the energy and the determination and the moxie to get the job done. So I think this could be the beginning of a new era in Canadian politics. I knew that common sense coalition is going to unite this country and not allow this country to be fractured. Because I do think our future is as bleak as that PCO report if we do not get some common sense politics and common sense government. And I think the beginning of that movement came with Premier Daniel Smith in Alberta. There was a real sense of conservatives taking history and moving forward. And yes, I love that comment. Comrade Carney, this guy has said his favorite political figures are Marx and Lenin. Well, isn't that called a Marxist-Leninist? But Mark Carney is all about making money. That's what he's good at. And he doesn't care how he does it. And the behavior of Brookfield Asset Management was appalling. And Mark Carney doesn't have any kind of social conscience. He pretends. But I like what this president of CARP said. You know, just because Mark Carney's boring doesn't mean you have to be too. And I think he's really come together in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, I will be back at my usual time tomorrow. And let's continue to resolve to resist. Especially if the results of this election are negative. We're going to have to continue to resolve to resist. And I'm going to continue to talk about the issues that matter to you and to fight for free speech on this platform. And let's pray for this country tonight. And I can't wait till the polls close to find out who has won this contest. Because it's been a heck of a campaign. And I think we're going to have an agreeable and happy result in this election. So thank you for watching today. I managed to make it through. Still not 100%. But I'll be back again tomorrow. Goodbye for now.